Hi, this is Tony, and we're back on the bench. And this evening, we're going to be doing a reassembly service only on this spinning reel, this Mitchell spinning reel. So this is a Mitchell 650 long shot. And as you can see, it's all taken apart. So this is actually more like a restore project because, as you can see, the condition of this reel, it's not in the best of shape. So we're going to try to revive it here. But I do have the separate video of just the disassembly of all these pieces and parts. We've already taken our drag stack apart, and you can see that these drag washers, they're not in the best shape. But we've cleaned them up. Actually, I did that in the disassembly video with some steel wool and some penetrating fluid just to kind of smooth out these washers and take all the rust surface off of them, and so they're nice and smooth again, and so they can actually be used. Okay, but what we're going to do for starters here is we're going to get into cleaning out the body, the housing here of the reel. And so I'm using this multi-purpose lube, and I've been letting that sink in. I'm going to take the toothbrush to this. I want to clean all this out real good because this has got a lot of hardened grease and grime and stuff in here, and we don't want any of that in here. We want all that to be gone. Okay, so we're going to clean it up the best we can. We're going to see if we can't get this reel in top shape to do some fishing once again, hopefully. Okay, so I'm just going to kind of continue this process here. Basically, I might pause the video a few times on this particular video just due to all the cleaning work that's involved in this. You don't need to watch me do every step of that necessarily, but I do want you to get the gist of it and understand what's involved in this. And you'll find that if you take the time to do these steps, and especially when it comes to the cleaning, you'll find that it does pay off, in the end. But you really do need to take the time to do it. Okay. And now that we have all that grease kind of loosened up here, I'm actually going to take a little bit of purple power cleaner to this now, just to kind of help it along that much more, because I really want to get all these old contaminants out. I don't want to see any of that stuff in there. Okay, but I just kind of make the use of the toothbrush and some Q-tips and things like that, and we'll have this cleaned up and ready to go soon. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to pause the video for a minute while I finish cleaning out this housing here, and then when we come back, we're going to start getting into all the pieces and parts. Okay, so now, as you can see, we've thoroughly cleaned out, this housing here, and I'm just going to kind of probe this area up here with the Q-tip just to make sure that we've gotten all those contaminants out of there. But you can see the difference. It's quite a bit cleaner, as it should be. Okay, and we want to make sure that it stays that way, and that we don't have anything impeding the operation or the functionality of the reel. Okay, so now that we're done with that, we're going to put that off to the side now. And we're going to focus on some of these pieces and parts here in this tray. All right, so we've got our pinion gear, and we've got our main bearing. We're going to start with those two pieces here, okay? Now, as you can see, we've got a lot of old gummed up grease on here and some sand or something of that sort. I'm just going to take some more penetrating fluid to these pieces here and really, really clean them off. We'll start with our bearing. So this is not really a serviceable bearing, okay? You can see the stainless steel ball bearings in there, okay? But all you can really do is take this penetrating fluid to that and just kind of clean that off the best that you can. And also note that there's a washer here that came loose, okay? And we want to make sure that we put that back the way that it came. I recommend getting schematics when you're working on these reels, or taking pictures along the way is helpful. Okay. We'll clean up our pinion gear here. Spray a little bit more penetrating fluid on that. Want to get all those old contaminants out of there the best that you can. I'm assuming this reel was used in salt water, just given its condition and some of the pitting and rust damage that I'm seeing, some of the corrosion. Okay, but you really want to make sure that all your surfaces are free of any kind of rust or any kind of corrosion damage, for that matter. Take the time to let that penetrating fluid do its job. Okay. And also, don't be afraid to take a brass wire brush to these gears, like on the pinion gear, for instance. The brass wire brushes are not going to scar the metal too deeply to the point where it'll affect the operation. You don't want to use steel brushes, though. That will affect it, so stay away from those. Okay. We're going to clean out the inside of this with a Q-tip here. The best you can see all that old grease and probably metal filings and whatnot in there. Okay. Now this washer was on the bottom here. Okay, so we're going to start with putting that back into position right now so we don't lose that. Okay, so that goes back on first. Okay, now we've got our bearing here and we've cleaned it up real good, the best that we can. So what we're going to do is we're going to flood that with a little bit of Real X oil as we go back. Okay. Now the bearings are exposed on the bottom here, and they're supposed to go facing downward in this particular setup here. On the top side, it's got a plate that kind of blocks them, okay, but that's the way it's designed to work on this particular reel, okay. Now we're going to take some Penn Precision blue grease to our pinion gear, and we're going to gently apply it to our pinion gear teeth, like so. Okay, and this is basically the beginning here of our reassembly. I'm going to put that back into position like so. Okay. Now, as you can see, we have another array of pieces and parts here that we need to address. Okay. So we're going to start with cleaning off these pieces here the best that we can, because they have old grease attached to them basically, and we don't want any of that on there. Okay. Okay, so we're going to start, take a little bit of blue grease here to the base here, where this piece is going to go into, and while we're at it, we'll just put a little bit here on the end as well, and up here on this ball. Okay, and we're going to insert that back into position here like so. Okay, now move this out of the way here. So we've got a couple of different pieces and parts here that need to go back into position. Okay, should look just like that basically. And then we've got two holes with two screws that go back in there. And then we've also got this spring that we need to attach back into position here. And it's a little hard to see here on camera with my fingers and gloves in the way, but there's that little hole right there that you need to get that spring attached to when you go to put this back, okay? So, okay, so it should rest in that hole like so. All right, and then we've got our two holes here for our set screws. They need to go into position. But if you're trying to work on this reel, and or any reel for that matter, I encourage taking pictures or at least downloading the schematic. You can get schematics for almost any reel out there now, I'd say, more or less. So that's you know, that's a pretty easy thing to obtain. Okay, so we've got good functionality there, it looks like. Okay, so we're just going to continue here with the rest of these pieces and parts here, essentially. So we've got a sleeve here. It goes back on top like so. Okay. And then we've got a series of some other pieces and parts here. And these are plastic parts, okay, so you want to be careful and use caution. Make sure that you don't go breaking them. We're going to just apply a little bead of Real X oil there. Okay. Put that into position. You want to make note of the orientation of these pieces and make sure that they line up properly. You need to have that latch in this little groove right here. Okay. It's a little difficult to see, but it basically needs to rotate back and forth like that real easily. Okay. Okay. And then on top, there's a washer, a little brass washer that goes on top of that, like so. Okay. So now we've got our rotor nut and set screw assembly here. We're going to take those out. Now we've got our rotor. Now we haven't done anything with this rotor yet. It's a little dirty on the inside, so we're just going to take some more multi-purpose lube to this here. Okay. Take our paper towel, clean off the inside real good. Again, this is more or less a restore project, and so that's kind of why we're taking a lot of time on this, because it's necessary if this reel's ever going to work again. Now, some people, they may not think it's worth it. That's fine, you know, but for somebody that really likes this particular model reel and they like the functionality of it and the way it works, or it's just the right size for their setup and what they're doing, sometimes it's worth it, you know, to go through the extent of all these things. There's nothing really broken with this reel. It just hasn't been cared for very well. Okay. Now we want to make sure that we clean out any old grease or grit or grime that's in here. And take a little bit of multi-purpose lube here. Okay, we're going to work that in like so. And then we're also going to hit these bail spring crevices here with some of that multi-purpose lube here. Let that sink its way in there. Okay, I can already tell this is a pretty smooth bail now. It definitely was not before, for sure. And then we've also got our line roller right here. Okay, now I have a separate video on line rollers. You can check that out on the YouTube channel, but for the sake of doing a thorough reassembly and restore, we're going to take this apart and we're going to have a look. This line roller doesn't look like it's in bad shape really at all, so that's good. Nice and clean under there for the most part, which is a little surprising. I'm going to take a little Real X oil to that. Put our line roller back in. You know, a line roller is something that's really overlooked a lot, and it's probably one of the most key components of any spinning reel almost, or a good majority of them, I'd say. You know, if the line roller doesn't work, it's the reel is almost kind of virtually useless, and so you want to make sure that that line roller is spinning. Okay. And then the only other thing I'm going to do here is I'm just going to put a little bit of multi-purpose lube on these screws here because I can see some evidence of some rust damage on those, and I want that to cease and not continue, because once rust starts, it's really hard to stop it. And so you want to make sure that you clean these pieces and parts up the best that you can. Okay. Okay. So the only other thing we're going to do is we're just going to take a little bit of Real Exo oil to these bail seams, these bail spring seams here. Okay. So now we're ready to put our rotor back into position like so. Okay, and then we've got a rotor nut. It goes back on. 11 millimeter. You can put that on with a open-end wrench like I'm doing right now, or you can use a socket if you have that, or a nut driver. I just happen to have this out on the deck here, so I don't want to over-tighten it. Got to line up those holes accordingly. Take just a little bead of oil to that, like so. So as you can see, this does take some time, but it's worth it in the end if you intend to use the reel. So take the time to do it right, and it'll pay off in the end. Okay, so now we're going to get into these pieces and parts here. So we're going to start here. We've got there's this kind of brass-like bushing here. We're just going to clean this up here the best that we can. And that actually goes here. We're going to take a little blue grease here to that inner housing right there, like so. Bushing goes right there. Okay, and then we've got our crosswind gear that we need to clean up. All these pieces and parts need a lot of cleaning here, so we're just going to take our time to do that right now. But I actually like this reel. I do have another one on the bench that's going to be in need of some service soon, but it's not the same generation. It's an older generation, but I don't think they had a very long run with this particular model. I think they made them in the late 80s and somewhat into the early 90s, and then they kind of disappeared, I think, at a certain point. I want to clean off all these teeth really, really well. Okay. Okay. I'm going to take our blue grease to underneath this crosswind gear, and then as well on the teeth. You don't need to overdo it, but you need just enough on there. Okay, like so. And then we're going to place that back into position like so. Okay. And then we have all these other pieces and parts here. We've got a bearing, we've got our main gear, a block, axle shaft, all these pieces here, and some screws. Okay. We're going to start here with the main gear, and there's this plastic bushing here that just kind of snapped off in my hand here. We're going to put that back right now, actually, after we clean it up here some. put that back down in there, like so. You just have to snap that bushing back down into place, essentially. Okay, now we got to get this all cleaned up. This is in pretty bad shape, this main gear here. So we're going to clean that off the best we can with the help of some multi-purpose stuff and toothbrush. And clean these gear teeth off real well. So you can see there's quite a difference, you know, from where it started. You know, it's just a matter of working out all that old grease, all those old contaminants, getting all that crud out of there. It just gums up the reel and the operation. It's not going to help anything. You know, some folks fall for the trap of just, you know, they grease and they oil their reels, but they never take the time to actually do any real cleaning or servicing, you know, which is really what these videos are about, you know, so that you can see what you need to do. And if you got the time and some basic tools, you know, you can do it like we're doing right now. So, okay. Okay, so we're going to take our blue grease once again here to our main gear teeth, like so, into the shaft on the main gear. Do a little bit on this side as well. And we're going to place that back down into position like so. Okay. Now, we've got our axle shaft here and our block. I'm going to hose that down with a little bit more penetrating fluid there. You can just see we've got all this old hardened grease on here. We want to get all that off of there. You don't want any of that in there at all. Okay. Okay, so we're going to take some 4/0 steel wool here to our main drive shaft. Want that to be nice, smooth, clean surface. Okay. A little bit of blue grease to that surface, like so. Then we're going to slide that back down into position, begin to start it in position. We've got our block here that still needs a lot of attention, unfortunately, so we're going to take the time to clean off all this old grease and grime and sand or whatever is attached to it here. Okay, I'm going to do a little bit of blue grease in this channel here underneath, like so. We're going to put our block back down into position here. Okay, so it should look like that. And then slide your shaft back down So you can line up your holes right here. A little bead of oil on that part there. And then we've got a set screw for that right here that we want to put back on. Just going to take a little oil to that thread as well, just for good measure. Okay, now we've got our side bearing here. We're just going to clean this out the best that we can with that penetrating fluid. And once again, we'll flood that with some Real X. Put that back on like so. And then at this point, we're ready to put our plate back on. I'm just going to take a little bit more blue grease here to the outside of the shaft here real quick before we put this back on. And we've got our 4 screws right here. These are all the same size from what I can tell on this particular model, so you don't have to worry about which ones go where. They all seem to be the same. Okay. So now, all that's really left here is obviously our drag stack and spool assembly and handle and whatnot. I'm going to clean off these drag washers here one more time, best that we can. Okay, now we've got our spool here, and we want to clean out the inside of this as well, best that we can. And actually what we'll do right here is I'm just going to spray just the tiniest little hint of multi-purpose lube on this paper towel here, just so we can clean out this surface rust that I'm seeing kind of built up in here. You don't want to flood this though with a bunch of oils and things like that, because that's your drag stack, and you don't want that impeding, you know, your drag washers, making them slip and whatnot. Okay, But we're just gonna take the rust off a little bit there. We'll take a Q-tip to this, to the inside here. Okay, and you can see, you know, there's some dirt buildup in there and whatnot. Okay, so that's not too bad. The only other thing I want to do is I just want to get this salt buildup off of here, because that'll just create more problems later when you're going to cast, and it'll start to pit the spool. You don't want that. Okay, so now we'll just go back in reverse order that we took these out. We've got a real simple drag stack here. There's a keyed washer, Teflon washer, regular metal washer, and then we've got our snap ring here. Okay, should look like that. We'll place that back into position here like so. Sometimes you gotta spin this around a little bit to get those washers to line up just right. There we go. Okay. Now the only other thing to do here is we've got this top cap here, and it has a spring right here, and then there's a nut under here. Okay, and you just want to inspect all this and make sure that there isn't anything holding up the operation, really. It doesn't look too bad, really. I'm just going to clean off this spring though here a little bit. It's a little rusted. Put that back into position like that. Okay. Snug that up a little bit. Okay, then all that's left here, and this is a washer for that handle. It goes on the inside of our handle nut here. Put that back into place. Take some blue grease to the handle shaft, and then we're also going to take some oil to our handle knob as well. Let that work its way in there. It started out very, very rough originally. Now it's pretty smooth. Okay, and then we also want to do a little bit of real oil right here at this pivot right here. Okay, put that back into position. Put our handle nut back on, like so. Okay, just gonna clean the gloves off here a little bit, as well as the reel. And we're going to try it out and see what we got here. So, quite a bit different. You can definitely hear the bearings in this for sure, you know, but it's just a lot smoother than it was before for sure. That bail is nice and smooth, nice clean operation there. Anti-reverse is working good. And the drag is definitely tightening up as it should. Yeah, that's all fine. Make sure you back off your drag when you're not using the reel. And that way that drag will last a lot longer and won't give you nowhere near as many problems. So there you have it. That is the Mitchell 650 LS spinning reel, all serviced up and ready to go. So thanks again for watching. This is Tony with Back on the Bench. If you liked the video, give it a thumbs up. If you'd like to see more, please do subscribe and make sure you hit that notification button. And we'll see you next time.